This is Cold Start.
I had a lot of fun talking about my checkered past and getting up to speed in Formula 3, but we sort of left off.
Yeah, it was fun to hear about your start into the racing world and how you had graduated through the F3 racing series of starting out about mid backpack and starting to get your first wins. And I can't imagine that was the end of your racing career.
Oh, it was not. I said how I wanted to go off and try to do more F3, and there wasn't really a place to go find to do that. But yeah, I learned about this new platform, and I think there's a lot more about it that's worth talking about. From Formula 3 cars, you learn aero and you learn downforce. You learn how to drive on a slick tire. You learn how to do everything manual, like brakes and steering. So I had to find something that could take advantage of that and would still give me the same kind of thrill behind the wheel that car could. Because I don't know, after that, street cars just weren't it. And GT cars didn't even light me up that way. So I had to figure out what was going to happen.
Yeah, I can imagine your first introduction into race cars being lightweight, high downforce cars, open wheel race cars, right? Formula cars. You can't really turn away from that. So it'll be interesting to learn about where you went from there.
Yeah, I was at that point where I'm like, hook it to my veins. I need more. Something that really helped to maybe minimize the effect of that was in chatting with an instructor about this. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I can find series where there's Formula 3 or some vintage stuff. It doesn't seem as exciting to me. But he said, well, even if you could go fit in that car, do you really want to go out there and be like last all the time? Because the reality is the kids who are coming up doing these series are wired for it from the time that they were much younger doing karting. They're athletes. They're training for this. They're making this their primary mission in life, right? To be at this level. And you have a job and like you haven't spent all the time in the gym you need to spend to be able to have the stamina to go run a race that's 2 hours long or whatever it is. And, maybe finding another platform, another path that's more aligned with where you are, what we call you, irrespective of how nice we think you are, we call you a gentleman driver. And a gentleman driver has opportunities that young kids coming up might not. And have you ever thought about endurance racing? And I said, well, geez, I've only ever done these sprint races that are 25, 30 minutes. Endurance sounds hard. Like you just said, I'm not an athlete. And I was quickly corrected to be made aware that this means it's a multi-driver team. It's 2 or 3 or 4 people sharing a car in stints. Those stints don't have to be 10 hours long. They could be 45 minutes. You can get in the car, drive your part, you get out and somebody else gets in. And there are different types of cars available. There are GT cars, there are formula cars, but there's these other things called sports prototypes. Like prototypes, like the cars that haven't come out yet, they said, no, it's this class of car. And they called it that because it was generally pushing technology ahead, and there was a lot of trickle down from these old prototype platforms into road cars and other race cars. But these sports prototypes, generally cars that have, a sleek body, they don't have exposed wheels generally, they're not open wheel. They're most of the time not open cockpit, although for a while prototype cars were, and there are still several prototype sports cars that have open cockpit. But there's a lot more opportunities for you to go explore in this endurance side if you want to get in a sports prototype. And by this point, I had a few colleagues from racing who moved on to this platform called LMP3, Le Mans Prototype 3. And I didn't even know really what that meant, but they showed me the car, and the car was badass. The car looked like the Batmobile to me. It had these swooping lines. It was still a downforce car, right? All the aero stuff that I learned in Formula 3 would be highly applicable in this platform. It was a little heavier, right? The Formula 3 car was so light, I was a dominant term in the equation of the weight of the car. I'm a 200 plus pound guy in a 1,150 pound car. That made a difference. Well, the prototype cars, this LMP3 platform, was about 2,000 pounds. So now the weight of the driver is a little less of a factor, and they happen to be a fair bit more powerful, going from a roughly 290 horsepower engine to these cars that have 400, 450 horsepower engines. My weight was less of a factor. Different environment. It's a closed cockpit, this particular platform, but it looked like something that was super cool. And having friends who were out there doing it, I said, yeah, this is something that looks like, hey, if he could fit in that car and he can do that, I beat him in Formula 3 races. I need to go try this thing next. So around that time, the school that was giving the Formula 3 classes had acquired an LMP3 car that they were campaigning. They had people who had raced the Formula 3 series that wanted to go onto this LMP3 platform, and they would actually campaign this car in IMSA, in the series that would allow LMP3 cars, and they'd go and they'd race at different places. And I went to a race at VIR and watched my buddy out there racing an LMP3 car at VIR, which was the coolest thing ever. And I said, I need to do this. So I went back and I set up some tests in an LMP3 car. That's just what they call renting the car for the day and going out to practice on track. Doing a track day effectively in this way they call testing, but it's a bit more rigorous. The goal there is learn the technique, learn how to be fast, use data from the car. We were doing that in Formula 3, and I already said I was a nerd, so I loved getting the data off the car and learning how to look at the graphs and traces to figure out how to use that to improve your performance. And that was an even bigger thing in these prototype cars. They had video footage from onboards that had overlays of all the gauges. It really lit me up. I said, yeah, I really want to try this. So I did some testing in LMP3 cars at Sonoma Raceway, at Thunder Hill, and at Buttonwillow. And at Buttonwillow, I got to drive a car. It was a rental car from somebody that was arranged with that was actually featured in a documentary that was created in the mid-2010s called The Gentleman Driver. And it was that same car that was in the movie that I got to use for the day and go out at Buttonwillow and learn how to push the car and learn how to use the aero and get technique for how to drive it. And it was not Formula 3. It was a lot heavier car by comparison. Put it in perspective, a 2,000-pound car. Nothing you can drive on the street today, with very few exceptions, is even anywhere near 3,000 pounds, right? Cars these days are 3,500, 4,000 pounds and up. You know, yeah, there's a Lotus or a Miata or some old thing once in a while that's a lot lighter, but this is a lot heavier car compared to what I was using, but a lot lighter than any other street car, to the point where I'd get out of my Formula car or my prototype car and I'd get in a Porsche and it felt like a pig. It felt slow and lethargic because it didn't have the instant response that I was used to in the Formula car. It didn't have the dynamics of the prototype car. But that was something that really worked for me, and I decided that's something I'm going to pursue next. And it was right around that same time that, unfortunately, the school started having financial problems. That's a story for another time. But the series that I was running, the Formula 3 series with the school, I got 2 races in the summer series. I was P1 for both. I won both races, and that was it. The series sort of evaporated. The school was about to fold. And my only opportunity ahead to do any more racing at this point was in this LMP3 platform. So I went and dove in and decided that was the next thing I was going to do.
I mean, F3 to LMP3, you're keeping in the third tier of the racing. So for any of those people that don't understand the numbers, is as the number gets smaller, the cars go faster, right? So F3 to F1, F1's the premier series. Same thing with LMP. There's an LMP3, LMP2, and an LMP1, which LMP1 changes names all the time. Now they're the hypercars,
right,
as we know of them today. But LMP3, they see it as the introductory car to prototype racing. And you look at this car and you're like, this is intro? Like, this thing's crazy. It's gnarly. It looks the part. It looks so race car. It sounds great. It has a Nissan Titan pickup truck V8.
Yeah, it's a Nissan naturally aspirated V8 that was from a truck. And they actually detuned it for endurance racing so that it could run for a really long time, so they don't want it to be maxed out all the time. Car was good for about 450 horsepower. Much like the Formula car, it ran on slicks. It was hydraulically assisted steering, so we had some power steering, but manual brakes, no ABS, no traction control, and high downforce. I said, yeah, this is what I want to do next. And the car, the cockpit itself is extremely unpleasant to be in. It's claustrophobic. You have this giant A-pillar effectively blocking your view out of the front right of the car. So, you know, where you might be used to looking down at the apex, it was a good reminder to know that don't be looking at the apex you're at now. Keep your head up, keep your eyes up, look at the next turn. You shouldn't even be looking there. You know where the apex is if you're approaching it. So the dynamics of this car were cool. They looked cool. They sounded amazing. And the opportunities to go drive these things were in IMSA, in Le Mans Cup, and ELMS over in Europe. It really lit me up with, wow, am I really on this path? You know, I only started doing this thing 2.5 years ago. I went from never having been at a racetrack to now thinking about, could I go race in Europe? I mean, this just blew my mind that that was actually a possibility, but that was the path I was on. And I sunk all my time and energy into it. And I had that racing sabbatical that went almost 6 full months of spending my days, not every single day, but as many as I could do, get to the racetrack, spent watching races, learning about this stuff and applying myself, getting back into working again, finding whatever time I could to get in the race car and be thinking about it. And that really, no pun intended, it really drove me forward to the point where I was now motivated to get in this new kind of car and go race it.
And so with this focus mindset towards the potential of going to Europe, did you ever make it happen? Did you go to Europe with the LMP3?
Yeah, so It's a sad story at this point, but at the end of 2019, I had been doing some testing here locally in California, and a friend of mine who had been racing this platform LMP3 for a little while longer had been doing this over in Europe in the Le Mans Cup series and had connections with some teams and said, look, I think, you're probably ready to do this. You used to beat me out here in Formula 3. Come out and give it a try. My first entry into that was scoring a test. He knew this team that invited me to come out, drive one of their cars for a couple of days at a track in Europe, and that would effectively be their assessment of me if they think I'm ready to go do this thing. So it was in October of 2019, which timing-wise, I was just coming off of an abdominal surgery that I had, but I got that better and I decided I'm going to go do this thing. So I had an appointment to go over to Europe, to go to Portugal, to go drive an LMP3 car at Portimao. And I didn't really know much about Portimao, so I thought, well, wait a minute, I've heard about this sim racing stuff. I'll go ahead and get on the sim and learn this track. And it's a really hard track. And then at that point, I realized, I think I've seen some of these Chris Harris videos where he goes and drives on this amazing circuit over in Europe. He's just waxing poetically about this circuit. And I realized that's the same place, Portimao. It's the Autodromo Algarve in Portimao, Portugal. And I'd been working on the sim and trying to learn the line and learn the dynamics. And there wasn't an LMP3 car in the sim at that time. We had to find the closest analog. So we were driving like Corvette C7 prototype car that they would use over in IMSA. And the dynamics were close enough to try to learn. So I did that. I flew over to Europe, went to Portugal, showed up for this test with a team who's called Cool Racing, who's pretty well known now. They won the European Le Mans series a few years in a row and have some big name drivers that had been running with them and then eventually taking over that team. So I went to Portimao and it was raining. And so I had the intimidation factor of driving a track I've never been to in my life in this car that I'm just starting to get good at, effectively auditioning for this team. And the conditions were a little sketchy. So, I went into it, put my head in the best place I could, went there for the European Le Mans Series race and Le Mans Cup races that were that weekend. So I got to watch my friend race. I got to see the next level LMP3 and LMP2 cars hurtling around this track, feeling like it was giving me a sense of what it was about so that following that race weekend on that Monday and Tuesday, I can go in the car and go test. So I went there to do that. My first time around the circuit, just kind of sighting laps in this car, or should I call it sighting lap in this car, I felt really good. I didn't realize the elevation was as high as it was. The dips and the valleys in the track, the compressions that were there, the off-camber stuff felt a lot different than it did in the sim being in the real car. The G-forces were pretty high, but I was feeling good, and there was a really long straightaway coming down the main straight on the front of the track. And I thought like, oh great, I'll be able to kind of get some heat in my tires and I'll be able to go and put it down. So my first out lap, what they call, your first time out on track, my first out lap, by the time I got around back to that main straight, I was feeling confident. So I went for it and I was going fast down the main straight, and there's a right-hand turn that's turn 1 at Portimao, where as soon as I got into turn 1, I got into the braking and I spun the car. My first attempt to actually be on this track at speed, and I spun, and it got in my head. I felt really bad about it. I felt like I'm damaging somebody else's equipment, first of all, like I'm wasting tires at minimum. I'm out there making a fool of myself. Like I thought I'd been training and learning this track, and I'd been practicing braking in this corner, and I thought I knew what I was doing, but it didn't go the way I expected. So after my out lap, and I spun not even on my first lap, I came back into the pit, and the principal of the team, a very high-level Le Mans driver named Nico Lapierre, who's a multiple Le Mans winner in an LMP2 car and now runs the sporting program for the Alpine LMP1 hypercar team. He comes over to me and says, that was high commitment. And it kind of made me feel good. Like I went for it. I made a mistake and I was beating myself up for it, but everybody was super encouraging and saying, hey, don't worry about it. It happens. Apparently they turned to each other in the pit when I went by on the straight that first time by, and they looked to each other and go, ooh, commitment. But my commitment didn't quite work out that time, but he helped me kind of like dust myself off and go back out on track. And little by little, I was getting the dynamics of this track, and it's a really hard track. I would hold it up next to Sonoma Raceway as one of my favorite places to drive in the world, even though by all accounts, I didn't do that well there. Over the 2 days of testing, I spun no fewer than 6 times. It was a little embarrassing. I felt good because I was bringing my lap times down over time. And by the end of this 2-day test, I was within about 4 or 5 seconds of the Le Mans Cup racers who would go out and try to race this track. But 4 or 5 seconds in racing is an eternity, right? As we know. And being 4 or 5 seconds off the pack, you're last. You're going to be distant last. And if you're like that every lap, you're going to probably be a full lap down by the time the race is over. You're not going to come off really well. So when I got back to the States, I sort of debriefed with my friend, and he was very thoughtful in the way he delivered this information to me. But he said, look, man, you have work to do. You need to get yourself fit. You need to go do some cardio. You were sort of dragging your ass around on the track. You were not able to keep up the level at which you needed to drive, and kind of didn't look that good out there. And I said, man, I kind of licking my wounds. Yeah, I could have done better. And, the setup of the car and all that stuff. I was like, no, it was my job to drive that car and to drive it well. And I need to learn how to deal with the dynamics of the fact that sim is not reality. It can teach you a lot. You shouldn't get too much confidence from it, because that confidence will bite you in a way that you might not expect when you finally get out there. So the end of October, I'm back home after having had not my favorite experience in the world. It was great. I loved it. Every minute of it. Couldn't get enough. I would go back and do it again, but came back and kind of felt bad that I didn't do as well as I had hoped. But the team saw potential in me, and they said, look, go do some work, go do some more testing, come back in a couple months and we'll try it again. So I got together with a local race support team called Cameron Racing. They're based here at Sonoma Raceway, and they help support some of these LMP3 and other prototype cars and GT cars too that they race in IMSA and SRO and other series. And they worked with me. They took me to Buttonwillow, which is a great place to go and push the limits of the car. And I got good instruction. I was working with a good friend of mine and formerly instructor, but now co-driver, Tom Dyer, who's been around these cars and been around these circuits and really was able to kind of help me square my mindset and my technique. And we just little by little started pushing the car more and going to these places where I could have a little bit more margin than at Sonoma. And it got me better. The other thing I did was I bought an exercise bike, a recumbent exercise bike that I had in my extra room. And I went on that thing. I would put on an IMSA race. And I set a goal for myself, which was I need to be able to ride this exercise bike at full tilt for an entire stint if I'm going to be able to go out there on the track and actually compete in this. So little by little, I built up to that. I'd put a race on. I'd watch other people race. And I'd get on the bike and I'd do the hill climb, or I'd do the high RPM bike ride kind of thing. And little by little, that paid off. And I did some stretching and some other, kind of stuff to get myself in shape, to the point where by the time February came around, I was able to line up another test with this team, Cool Racing, over in Europe. This test was going to be in France, Circuit Paul Ricard, in a little town they call Le Castellet. So some people were, oh, you're going to go test at Le Castellet. I said, no, I'm going to test at Paul Ricard. They said, yeah, that's Le Castellet. So I made arrangements, and my wife and I went over to Europe, and we got there. We spent some time at the team's headquarters, which was on the border between France and Switzerland. They had a sim there. They set me up on their sim and gave me some pointers for Paul Ricard. Now, Paul Ricard is a very different track than Portimao. It's mostly flat. There's not much elevation at all. And there's a lot of runoff, and it's pretty famous for having this painted runoff with this special sort of paint that has, I think it's titanium fibers in it, or some kind of metal fibers in the concrete itself, so that if you go off track, it'll slow you down and actually harms your tires. So it's a disincentive for going off. But a lot of racetracks, they have gravel or grass, and the implications of going off track can be bad. You can get in a bad accident. They're not as easily recoverable, but that makes for better racing. Some people don't like Paul Ricard because it seems like, what risk is there to take if it's all paved off track? But the reality is it's going to tear up your tires, and you're going to lose your lap, and you're going to have to probably pit again. So going into this track, I tried to go in with open eyes. I did a little bit of prep on this sim. I tried to learn the line, got out there, and things went a lot better this time. My stamina was higher. I was able to drive for longer stints without having to come into pit. I was able to sort of assimilate the feedback that I got more quickly. There was a little bit of a language barrier. Not a lot of people around me spoke fluent English. They spoke good English, better than my French or my whatever. But hearing all this stuff and knowing how to translate it to action in the car, and having my coach Tom there along with me really helped a lot. And by the end of that, I was now within about 2 seconds of the pack of racers who were going out on track at Paul Ricard. And I felt much more confident, like, yeah, I can get to where I need to be so that I'm not the guy at the back of the pack every single time. Because as much as it's fun to have that experience to go race, being last all the time is a little disheartening. Even if you go in with a good mindset, like, I'm just going to have fun. We all want to compete to win, or at least to advance. So in talking with the team, looking at Le Mans Cup and the schedule for the coming year, we said, look, you can go out there and you'll be at the back of the pack based on the kind of times you're doing and where you are in your development. You can go race, you're plausible, but you're probably going to need to be used to getting last or one of the last few drivers in the pack, and that might not be a very fulfilling experience for you. Well, there's this other series that we found. It's called Ultimate Cup. And Ultimate Cup was several different classes, but they had a prototype class. And they ran at 7 different racetracks around Europe. And it was what I might call LMP3 and a half, right? It wasn't less than LMP3. It was LMP3 cars. But the racers there maybe had a little less experience than the people doing Le Mans Cup on the path toward ELMS and who were going to go drive the 24-hour Le Mans potentially. This was just a starter step for me to take. And at first I was a little bummed because I thought, I really wanted to go do this Le Mans Cup thing. But no, it seemed like a really good fit for me. And it was 7 races in France, Spain, and Portugal over the same calendar that these other races would be going on. And I said, yeah, sign me up. Let's do it. So I effectively bought a seat. I rented a car from this team. They made me a member of the team. They got me a racing suit. They made me, a full-fledged member of the team, the gentleman driver. That's what I became, is this gentleman racer joining the team where they were going to pair me with a pro, this Pro-Am format, my racing instructor, Tom. We went over to Europe together, and now I even know my co-driver. That makes me so much more comfortable. It put me in this place where I felt like, yeah, I can go do this and maybe go be good and maybe even go win. So my first race was to be March 20th, 2020 at Barcelona. So I got back on the sim and I've been training and I got all my plane tickets and hotel reservations and I was ready to go race at Barcelona. And that's the F1 track, right? Circuit de Catalunya. I was so excited. Paul Ricard was an F1 track. At the time, Portimao was not yet. It was considered, I think, a grade 2 or class 2 track, which now, since this has occurred, F1 actually was at Portimao. But at the time, they hadn't been there yet. So it was going to be the big show. Go to the circuit in Barcelona, go race where I've seen so many of my new but now heroes of F1 and these other series race. I was excited. But of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020. I got an email from the airline telling me, yeah, we just canceled your plane tickets to Europe. And I was bummed. I was like, what's going on? And maybe you've heard the news. There's this thing going around, this virus thing. They're not sure what it is. And so my opportunity to get over to Europe and do this race, the door sort of closed on me right as I was getting out of the gate. And it was sort of disheartening. And I lost a lot of momentum in trying to do that. And around the same time, I started having some orthopedic problems, like neck problems and weird pains and stuff that it took some time to diagnose, shoulder problems. So it actually wound up being a blessing that I didn't have to work through all that stuff. And I had some time to go test on my own, go do a ton of track days, learn the LMP3 platform to the point where I decided to buy my own car. I wasn't going to buy my own race car. A lot of people told me, don't buy a race car, use somebody else's. It's good advice. But now the dynamics, the whole world was different. We didn't know if we were going to be able to go out and do this ever again. And driving a car at the track was one of the few things that we could do during COVID because it's a solitary activity. You're outside. You're not sharing the air, right? You're wearing a helmet. You have as good of a mask on as well. So I did a lot of test days and track days in the LMP3 car with the goal that I'd go get back out after it again. At this point, I'm heavy into work and stuff's going on. It made it really hard for me to see how I was possibly going to go over to Europe and spent, several months back and forth or there to go do a race series. So I sort of set my sights on more local racing. I found a few local race series that had LMP3 in it. So I entered those and had some good success in those. There was a race series called the GT Celebration, which is also now no longer running, but managed to score a first place and a third place in the GT Celebration in a solo race and in the Pro-Am race with my co-driver, Tom. It felt great to go up on the podium and hold up the plastic trophy. And for what that was worth, it was finally some achievement in racing in this platform that I'd for so long wanted to do. And it was a really good way to culminate the experience I had in the F3 cars, which, by the way, in the meantime, I'd been still doing track days in the F3 car because I just loved it. And it was such a cool platform. It was what I learned in. I loved the dynamics of the car. It was even lighter than the LMP car. You're outside. It was just a different feel. So I kept that going, but P3 became LMP3. That became my goal for where to go race because it was hard to find places to go race in F3. And it was super rewarding. To this day, if I could put myself back out there, which I'm in the process of getting myself healthy and strong again, I want to go race P3 again. In the meantime, I found this other platform, another sports prototype car, and there's tons. There's Spec Racer Fords, there's all these other things. Radical race cars are open cockpit, closed wheel sports prototypes. And I knew some other friends who were doing it, and They were less powerful cars. They actually ran a motorcycle engine. The Suzuki Hayabusa engine was in these things. So they revved up really high, but they had real downforce and they were real sports prototypes. And so I got into those as sort of a middle ground. So I'm now at this point where I'm getting ready to get back to the track. I'm going to go out in this radical sports prototype. I'm using that as my training ground to get healthy enough so I can withstand the G-forces and the environment that is in the LMP3 car. And my goal is to get back out and hopefully race it again. So it was a sad story, but I think it ends on an up note because I'm looking forward to getting back out in that car, looking for opportunities to go race it, and I can't wait for the next one.
What I think is so great about racing in general is it changes. Your goals change. The ceiling changes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like your story of going from the F3 racing in your early racing career and then exploring this new avenue of the LMP3 car and wanting to race in Pro-Am series over in Europe, all this stuff. You reach the top, you reach the ceiling in that F3 series in the Simraceway school series, and you're like, well, what's next? I want more. And in racing, you can always continue to lift the ceiling.
Sonoma Raceway is no joke. That's a hard place to learn to drive. And Formula 3 cars are legit. Those things had power. They were full downforce, more downforce than they weigh, right? That kind of thing. But it was among the same group of people. And then I had to take the next step. And seeing what was out there in the rest of the world took me back down to size and realized I had a lot more climbing still to do. But it motivated me to want to go do that and do that in the next kind of venue.
It's just an endless journey. And that's what's so great about motorsports is there's so much to work on. And if you watch Ford versus Ferrari, there's that scene that Miles is on the runway and he's with his son and do you see it? The perfect lap. It's out there somewhere. And it's that same thing in motorsports is this concept of perfect, of being the fastest, putting down the fastest lap and all of these achievements that you want to get. It's an endless chase.
Yeah,
and that's what's
right.
so great. I mean, life in general is that too, of endless happiness or the perfect life or perfection. It's this thing we always strive for and try to achieve. And it's just an endless reach. And motorsports offers that to you of it's this challenge, but the challenge can always be harder and it can be always more difficult. And once you think you have a grasp on something, change cars, change track, change series. There's all these different knobs that you can continue to twist to continue making it difficult on yourself until you're 7-time world champion of F1. There's always more. And even Lewis Hamilton is like still striving of, I want 8. I want another one. I want to win it in a Ferrari. There's always things that you can do to continually make the sport difficult and make it interesting and enjoyable, because I think at the end of the day, we all just love making things hard on ourselves.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, you learn so much about yourself doing this, right? Finding your limits and confronting them and pushing past them. In the beginning, it's fear, right? You have fear because you're driving this machine at a wall and you're afraid it might not stop, to the point where you learn that the way it's engineered and the way you have technique, like you can get over that. And it's finding these sort of next hills to climb and the next things that you have to confront and work your way through and feeling that accomplishment. Like in my wildest dreams, I never thought I would have an FIA license. Okay, bronze rated, that's like the entry level, but I got my FIA license and my IMSA credential that I could go race with these people who are at that level and I could go participate in that. I might not do well, but I'm at a point where now I'm plausible, right? So I know I can continue to climb that ladder. And I have a really good friend who went and did this, and he got to the point where he went from Le Mans Cup to ELMS, the next level up, like the European Le Mans Series, driving an LMP3 car. They drove at Le Mans in the 24-hour Le Mans. It was a modified format for this group. I think they did a 4-hour event. But he won the series. I saw him on the podium winning the European Le Mans Series in this thing that I used to go race Formula 3 with him, and sometimes I'd beat him. So I said, wow, there's the potential for me to do that at some point if that's what I want. And a lot of this stuff too is just gauging, why are you doing it? What is it that you're actually after? I don't have anything to prove to anybody else. I have this to prove to myself that this is something I want to do, and the feeling of achievement feels so good, and trying hard and getting better at a thing feels so good. I want more of that. So that's why I do this. I'm not looking to go take the brass ring and go win the 24-hour Le Mans or go win the IMSA series. Yeah, I might want to participate in those at some point in my life, but what I'm getting out of this is getting to participate and learning these things about myself and bettering myself in these ways that maybe were areas I didn't even know that I had development to do. And that's what makes it so fulfilling, and that's what's such a great set of memories, even the bad times, even the crashes, even the down times, even getting the door slammed on us when COVID happened. One door closes, another one opens. That's the cliche, right? But that's the reality of life. And if you're constantly seeking perfection, you'll never learn to enjoy and accept what is good. And I had to learn that about myself. And going away from a race weekend feeling bad about being in second place, that's no fun. There's no achievement in that. You just seem like a miserable bastard to everybody around you. Nobody wants to be around the guy who's upset all the time because he didn't win. They want to be near the person who had a fun time and realizes what a privilege it's been to go out and do this thing and to see yourself get better and have the opportunity and to know things don't always go your way. And sometimes when they do, everything lines up and it's like a ray of light coming through and there's that warm feeling you get from it. But learning to have that same feeling when things aren't completely lined up, that's sort of like the secret of life. Finding enjoyment from your everyday. We get no more time. Once a moment is over, it's gone and behind you. If you're worrying about it still, you're missing the current moment. So it's that awareness and living in the now that I think racing has helped to teach me the most, and the thing I've taken the most away from it and has made me a happier person in my life.
It's almost like racing is medicine to a certain degree. It's the best therapist you can ever have. It's not cheaper than a therapist. It's probably the most expensive therapist you can have, but you can achieve the same sort of insight to yourself. And I think everyone goes through that journey. If you're around racing and tracking and just driving cars at speed at racetracks, I think we all go through this kind of progression, this change, this eye-openness of this activity that'll show you things about yourself and how you can relate that to day-in-day life.
Yeah, it's been such an awesome path. Now, it's been long enough now that I sound like an old guy. I'm like, I just started doing this 9 years ago, right? That's a long time. But all along the way, I've kind of gone about it with this sort of like childlike approach. Like, I just can't get enough of it. Like a kid in a candy store kind of a feeling. And I still feel like that. Watching racing, participating in it. Sure, I'm a little older and more jaded about some things, but I can't wait for the next time to go get in a car and have an opportunity to do it. But now I feel like I've achieved that level of knowing how to go out and just do it to have fun. Don't get so caught up with the numbers, the lap times, the metrics, the showing somebody else what you were able to do. Like, get the enjoyment for yourself. And that's where I think I am now. I'm hoping I'm there. I'll let you know when I get back from my next time in the car. But I think what we're going to do is put tape over the lap counter, because I really want to embrace that feeling of being in the car and enjoying the experience of being in the car and not getting caught up in those other things. And the rest will come. And my own experience has taught me that. I went into this wanting to do a thing because I was missing out on all the fun my friends were having, to the point where I just wanted to finish a race, to the point where I just didn't want to be last, to the point where I was winning the series and looking for more to go take on. Sure, there's been setbacks along the way and incidents and things that occur, but they've all taught me a ton, and I feel like I'm a much better person for it here today. You can ask other people if that's the case, but in my own mind, and that's really the ultimate arbiter of all these things, is how you feel about yourself. And this sort of activity has given me that flow state, that ability to kind of feel like everything else has fallen away, and this pure experience has been able to kind of show its way through, and to the point where I knew I want more, and I know I still want more. The LMP3 path had changed from what I initially sought out. I haven't given up on it. It will look different when I do it again. I'm still enjoying what I've learned from doing it and the experiences that I've had from it. I go back and I look at the laps that I put down. I'm still shocked that that's me driving that car. When I see what it's capable of doing, what I was able to put together with it, knowing that there's so much more, but now looking past that criticism of myself, like, wow, you could have braked later there. You could have turned in earlier here. You could have, whatever those things are. Now seeing it and enjoying it and having it be this vicarious experience, that it's my own experience I had once, but I can go back and enjoy it again and relish what was so amazing about it. And I can't wait to go do more of it. We'll see where it is and how it looks. But, those cars are starting to age, and who knows, maybe there'll be a vintage series, or there's another club series that uses that same platform. And I wouldn't be too surprised if you were to see me out doing it in one of those other forums pretty soon.
It's great to hear about how your journey progressed, thinking F3 was the end of the road, being able to find opportunities elsewhere. It's just awesome to see that your passion never really died. I mean, through your whole journey, you dealt with some difficulties, setbacks, obviously, even throwing it back to last time when we're talking about your very first track days of having some complications with the vehicles. And even with the LMP3 story of, the setbacks of COVID and things like that, but still having that passion, still finding an opportunity to get in a car, getting in that Radical that you talked about, that new vehicle that's in your stable at the moment, and still having that passion for driving. And it sounds like it's going to continue, and it sounds like you still want to do more. And that's kind of what happens with this passion and this activity. It's hard to leave it. It's hard never to go back. I mean, you talk about people smoking cigarettes and they try to take a break, and it might be 5 years later and they smoke again. Racing's a very similar activity where it is an addiction to a point where you can go through withdrawals and just need to have it back. And however you can find that, it might not be in the same car that you had before, but finding what's going to fit and just to get back on the road and just to have that feeling again.
Yeah, it lights up those same brain chemicals, right? We make these kind of comparisons, but it's true. The feeling you get behind the wheel, the feeling you get experiencing these things, smelling the smells at the racetrack, hearing the sounds at the racetrack, being outside, being around other people who feel the same way around this stuff. It's so invaluable. There's just no way to put a price tag on it. And make no mistake, the price tag is really high. Like, the money part of this is real, and finding a way to balance your passion with everything else you need to do in life and your other obligations is part of it too. And that's kind of a drag, and I don't want to bring everybody down, but the reality is, finding a way to do the things you want to do, like, you'll find the way if you're passionate enough about it. And it doesn't have to be an addictive substance. It doesn't have to be an activity that draws you in the same ways that maybe some of those other vices do, if you will. This is something that'll help to grow you and give you capability and a different outlook on your own life and other problems that you come across. And it's just a totally valuable thing. And I couldn't recommend it more highly to anybody who might be thinking about trying it.
Yeah, and it is an expensive activity, but throwing it back to our Nick Strickler episode, it doesn't always have to be expensive, right? There are other ways and other avenues to get into it, and just because you're in a cheap car doesn't water down the experience whatsoever. We're always going to chase speed, but keep your eyes open, right? And your story of doing different things along the way and trying different flavors of this sport, I encourage other people to do the same thing of just find opportunities and jump behind the wheel in whatever it may be. And it's awesome to also hear about the gentleman driver side of racing as well. I think that's very insightful for people. Not a lot of people know that side of racing, but there's opportunities out there. And whatever your budget is, whatever your background is, even whatever your age is, within motorsports, there is a group, there is a category, there is a series, a car that is going to be able to accommodate you. So put in that effort, find what's going to work for you. I think our sport is awesome. Any person that wants to get involved in it is more than welcome. So thanks for sharing the continuation of your racing career and how you kept reaching for the stars, I would say, and finding opportunities to elevate yourself and elevate your experience within racing. It's awesome to hear about, and it's awesome to hear that those stars aren't dying out yet.
No, it's really fun even just to reflect on this stuff. And if you're at all thinking about trying this stuff, I'd say, go race. What do you got to lose? Try it out. You might learn something about yourself.
Well, thanks, Todd. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Alice.
This has been Cold Start. Thanks for listening.